The city woke under a thin veil of mist, the kind that softened the towers of downtown Toronto and made everything look briefly forgiven. Malik Grant zipped his jacket higher against the chill as he crossed the service alley behind the glass tower of Reed Energy, toolbox in hand. His breath rose in small white clouds, disappearing like the plans he used to make before life narrowed down to one simple promise. Keep Zoe safe. Keep moving. Inside the maintenance corridor, fluorescent lights hummed a tired rhythm. Malik checked his tablet. Sublevel generator inspection, priority 2. He crouched. The smell of oil and metal familiar. Grounding. Some people prayed. He worked with his hands until the noise in his head went quiet. A low voice crackled over the building intercom. All floors prepare for executive visit. CEO arriving in 10. Malik exhaled. He'd been on enough jobs to know what that meant. Polished shoes, rehearsed smiles, people pretending the air was thinner when someone rich walked in. He just needed to finish the circuit check and get out before the chaos started. Down in the sublevel, the generator throbbed like a tired heart. Malik knelt beside it, twisting a wire loose, steady and precise. His hands, scarred but careful, moved with the quiet assurance of a man who'd learned patience the hard way, through grief, through raising a child alone, through bills that didn't care about sorrow. Above ground, Clara Reed stepped out of a black sedan, greeted by a team of executives with perfect smiles and perfectly hidden anxiety. The morning news had just featured her company's new Green Promise initiative, a $1 billion pledge to transition corporate buildings into renewable systems. She smiled for the cameras, practiced and poised, but inside she felt the familiar tug of fatigue. It was easier to manage investors than to silence her father's voice echoing in memory. Legacy first, Clara, feelings later. By the time she entered the elevator, Malik was already on his way up from the basement, pressing the same call button from another floor. The doors closed halfway, then jolted, a sharp metallic clunk. The light flickered, then died. Perfect, Malik muttered under his breath. A beat later, a clear female voice cut through the dark. Is someone there? Yes, ma'am, he replied, tapping the panel. Looks like a power trip. Give me a minute. In the dim emergency light, Clara could make out his silhouette. Tall, shoulders squared, wearing a navy work jacket, with a faded patch that read, Reed Energy Maintenance. Not the kind of man who usually shared her elevator. She folded her arms. This building has a safety protocol for these things. I am the protocol, Malik said evenly, prying open the panel. A spark snapped. Sorry, didn't mean to startle you. She blinked. He wasn't apologetic, just calm, matter of fact. The air hummed between them, tense, but oddly level. How long will this take? She asked. Depends. Circuits don't respond to titles. She looked at him sharply, unsure whether to be annoyed or impressed. Most people stumbled over her name within seconds, filling silence with small talk or awe. This man didn't even ask who she was. What's your name? Malik. No last name. He looked up from the wiring. Depends who's asking. The elevator jolted again. Clara gripped the rail. He didn't flinch. Instead, he glanced at her, eyes dark, steady. You might want to step back, Ms. Reed, she said. Clara Reed. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by the faintest smile. Right. The boss of bosses. I prefer CEO. Titles again, he murmured, then pressed a sequence of buttons. The elevator hummed, back to life. When the doors finally slid open on the ground floor, the two of them stood still for a second, the city noise bleeding in. Claire expected a nod, maybe a rushed apology. Instead, Malik simply stepped aside, letting her pass first. Thank you, she said. Just doing my job. She turned, studying him, the calm posture, the steady voice, the quiet dignity that didn't bow. You're not like most people who work here. Maybe because I don't work for here, he said. Just keep the lights on. Her lips twitched, half smile, half curiosity. That's more important than you think. He lifted his toolbox. Tell that to payroll. The line lingered between them. Simple, sharp, true. Clara's assistant hurried over, whispering updates, but her gaze stayed on the man disappearing through the service hall. Something about the way he moved, unhurried, unafraid, unsettled her in a way board meetings never could. That night, the sky over Regent Park glowed orange from the streetlights. Malik parked his old Honda outside a brick apartment building and climbed the narrow stairs. The smell of curry and detergent filled the hallway, the smell of real life. Inside, Zoe sat cross-legged on the couch, coloring solar panels on a sheet of paper. You're late, she said, without looking up. Had to rescue a fancy elevator, he replied, dropping his toolbox by the door. Did it say thank you? He chuckled. Not really, she grinned. Then it's like people on TV again. He tousled her curls and sat beside her. You're too smart for cartoons. Then tell me a story. He hesitated, thinking of the woman in the elevator, the flawless posture, the cold edge that cracked for a second when she said her own name. He didn't want to talk about work, about money, or about being invisible. So he told her about the stars, about how some burned, quietly for billions of years, lighting whole worlds without ever being seen. Zoe listened, eyes wide. So we're like that? Yeah, he said softly. Quiet light. Still counts. She leaned against him, half asleep. Outside, a train rumbled past. Malik looked through the window at the city's glittering skyline. Somewhere out there, that woman, Clara, was probably sitting in a penthouse full of glass and silence. Different worlds, same sky. He turned off the lamp, the room dim but warm. The only sound, the hum of the radiator. Life wasn't easy, but it was honest. And sometimes, that was enough. If stories like this speak to you, stories about ordinary people who carry extraordinary strength, share it. Tell someone. Remind them that quiet kindness still matters. Because the world may run on power, but it heals through compassion. The first snow of the season came early that year, soft, reluctant, dusting the corners of Yorkville with quiet grace. Inside Maison Vert, the kind of restaurant that wrapped its name in French to charge double, violins whispered through hidden speakers, and candles burned with clinical perfection. Malik Grant didn't belong there. He knew it from the moment the hostess's eyes flicked to his faded jacket, then to the coupon in his hand. But Zoe, bundled in her puffy red coat and grinning like she'd just won a field trip, didn't seem to notice. Table for two, Malik said, his tone polite but firm. The hostess forced a smile. Of course, sir. May I see your reservation? He handed her the printed voucher, a winter family dinner special he'd saved for weeks. Her smile wavered just a fraction. Oh, this is for the promotional menu. We can seat you near the bar if that's okay. Zoe tugged his sleeve. Can we sit by the window, Dad? It's pretty. Malik glanced at the empty booth by the glass. A perfect view of the falling snow. That one's fine if it's available. The hostess hesitated, then shook her head. I'm sorry, that's for VIP guests only. Zoe's face fell, small and quick. Malik nodded, swallowing the sting. Bar's fine. Come on, kiddo. He was used to moments like this. A lifetime of quiet humiliations, polished over until they barely hurt anymore. But across the room, Clara Reed had just lifted her glass of Merlot when she saw them. The little girl, the worn coupon, the look on Malik's face that wasn't anger, just exhaustion. For a beat, something inside her cracked, the kind of crack that didn't make noise but changed the air. Excuse me, she said, standing. The hostess turned, startled. Ms. Reed, seat them by the window, Clara said simply. The hostess blinked. But, do it. Her tone wasn't loud, just final. Within seconds, the staff rearranged settings, menus, candles, as if the entire room had inhaled and dared not exhale until she sat back down. Malik looked up in surprise as the hostess approached again, all smiles now. We've just had an opening by the window, sir. If you'd like. He frowned but followed, Zoe skipping beside him. As they passed, Clara's gaze caught his. Steady, unsmiling, familiar. He recognized her instantly. The elevator. The sharp, calm woman who didn't flinch when the lights went out. When he sat down, he gave her a small nod. She returned it, nothing more. For the next few minutes, the room returned to its curated rhythm. Soft music, clinking cutlery, muted conversations about stocks and weekend ski trips. Malik helped Zoe with her menu, translating words like beurre blanc and coulis. She leaned in, whispering, "It just means sauce, right?" "Basically," he said, smiling. "Fancy words for sauce." At the next table, Clara closed her laptop, pretending to check her phone while stealing glances at them. The way Malik leaned toward his daughter, patient, focused, present. It was something she hadn't seen in years. In her world, fathers were figureheads on magazine covers, not men who carried napkins in their pockets and let their children laugh out loud in public. Zoe's giggle broke through the gentle murmur of the restaurant. "Dad, you said sauce fancy." Clara caught herself smiling. The waiter returned with their meals, visibly nervous under Clara's lingering presence. Malik thanked him, his voice low and genuine. Halfway through dinner, Zoe excused herself to the restroom, leaving Malik alone for a moment. Clara turned then, her words almost cautious. "I owe you an apology," she said. He looked up. "For what? For the spectacle? I didn't mean to make a scene." He shook his head. "You didn't. You just reminded them what decency looks like." She paused. "You could have refused." "I could have," he said. "But my kid thinks magic happens when people are kind. Didn't want to ruin that tonight." Clara studied him, unsure how to respond. The table between them felt like a bridge, built out of silence and small truths. "I remember you," she said finally. "The elevator." He nodded. "Hard to forget. You looked ready to fire the whole building." "Only if it stayed broken," she replied dryly. He smiled faintly. "Good policy." Their eyes met. A moment that wasn't romantic, not yet, but human, unguarded. Two people from opposite worlds, acknowledging the weight of their own solitude. When Zoe returned, she spotted Clara. "Hey, you're the elevator lady," Clara laughed, caught off guard. "That's one way to put it." Zoe slid into her seat, oblivious to the tension adults carry. "Dad says you help big buildings use less power." "That's cool. He helps fix the power when it breaks." Clara tilted her head. "Then we're both trying to keep the lights on." Zoe grinned. "Exactly." For a while they all talked. The kind of small talk that felt unexpectedly warm. About snow days, about how Zoe wanted to build a solar treehouse one day, about how Malik couldn't cook, but made great hot chocolate. Clara found herself laughing more than she'd planned to. The sound surprised her. When the check came, Malik reached for his wallet, but the waiter hesitated. "Ms. Reed has already covered your bill." Malik's expression hardened. That wasn't necessary. Clara met his gaze. "Consider it repayment for the elevator." He opened his mouth to protest, then stopped. "You're used to people owing you, aren't you?" She hesitated. "Occupational hazard." Zoe looked between them, confused by the subtle friction adults called pride. She tugged Clara's sleeve. "Dad says kindness is quiet, but yours was kinda loud." The line hit the table like a soft punch of truth. Malik smiled, embarrassed. Clara's eyes softened, caught off guard by the child's sincerity. "Well," Clara said at last, voice gentler now, "maybe I'll learn to whisper better next time." Zoe nodded, satisfied, already distracted by the snow outside. Malik rose, helping his daughter with her coat. "Thank you," he said, simple, unadorned. Clara only nodded. "Take care, Mr. Grant." They left, the door closing behind them with a soft chime. Outside, the snow had thickened, falling in slow, forgiving flakes. Clara watched through the glass as father and daughter walked away, Zoe skipping, Malik steady beside her, two small figures swallowed by the light of the street lamps. For reasons she couldn't name, Clara felt something loosen in her chest, something that had been tight for years. She didn't know yet that this quiet dinner, born of coincidence and compassion, had just altered the trajectory of her carefully controlled world. She only knew that when she lifted her glass again, the wine tasted different, less sharp, more alive. Ottawa was colder than Toronto that week, the kind of cold that made glass hum and breath turn brittle in the air. From the 32nd floor of the Reed Energy headquarters, the city below looked quiet, efficient, and entirely deceiving. Clara Reed stood by her office window, the morning sun cutting a harsh line across her desk, dividing light from shadow. Marcus moved the numbers again, said Evelyn Hart, her CFO, and the only person in the building who dared to drop pretense around her. She placed a folder on the glass table. Neat, color-coded, meticulous. The Green Promise Fund doesn't add up. Transfers routed through a consultancy we've never vetted. He claims it's for overseas research. Clara didn't look up. And you don't believe him? Evelyn shook her head. The Cayman Shell company attached to it has no physical address, no tax ID. Marcus signed off on it himself. Clara finally turned, her reflection a ghost beside Evelyn's in the window. If this leaks, it will bury us. The Green Promise is the only thing keeping the board from demanding another round of layoffs. Evelyn crossed her arms. Or it buries him first. But we'll need proof. That word, proof, hung in the air like frost. Clara exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the glass. Find out what you can, quietly. Evelyn nodded and left, her heels clicking down the marble hall. The office fell silent, except for the low buzz of the HVAC system. Clara sank into her chair, flipping through the reports. Numbers she'd once trusted now looked like lies written in ink. Her father's voice echoed in memory. You keep control, Clara. When they smell weakness, they'll eat you alive. She rubbed her temples. Weakness wasn't the problem. Blindness was. The intercom crackled. Ms. Reed, there's a maintenance request logged for your floor. Something about a short circuit in the private server room. Should I let them up? Clara almost waved it off, then hesitated. Send them. 5 minutes later, the door opened, and Malik Grant stepped in, toolbox in hand, expression neutral but alert. Small world, he said quietly. Clara blinked. Apparently it is. He nodded toward the far wall. I got a call about a surge in your backup system. Mind if I take a look? Please, she said, motioning him in. He crossed the room, his boots leaving faint prints on the polished floor, and knelt by the panel behind her desk. Whoever installed this didn't ground it properly, he murmured, unscrewing a plate. Clara leaned against her desk, arms folded. And here I thought I paid for perfection. He glanced up at her, a flicker of a smile. In my experience, perfection's the first thing people sell when they want to hide a mistake. She raised an eyebrow. You sound like you've worked in management. No, just life, he said simply. The power cut for half a second, plunging the room into dim light. Malik steadied the panel. Found your surge, but you've also got an old drive back here. Looks like it was bypassed, not removed. Clara frowned. An old drive? He held up a small silver device, dusty and half buried in cables. Probably nothing, but it's still connected to the system. Her instincts prickled. Can you open it? I can try, he said, if you're comfortable with me touching company data. She hesitated, then nodded. Do it. He set the drive on her desk, plugging it into his portable terminal. The screen flickered alive, code scrolling down in green lines. Most of this is corrupted, he muttered, but I can recover fragments. Minutes have passed. Clara paced the room, the hum of the computer filling the silence. Then Malik spoke softly. You'll want to see this. He turned the screen toward her. The recovered text was an email chain in dates, signatures, attachments. The subject line read, Green Promise Transfer Authorization. And beneath it, her own company's financial director approving a transfer to a Cayman account. Signed by Marcus Hale. Clara's chest tightened. How did you? It wasn't hard, Malik said. People hide things in systems like they hide guilt, poorly. She stared at the screen. For a moment, her mind ran through the calculus of damage, the board, the investors, the press. Then something inside her shifted. Past fear, past calculation. I need this data secured, she said finally. I can encrypt it, keep a copy off-site, Medlik offered. She studied him, cautious. Why help me? He shrugged. Because if you're right, a lot of people are working hard for something that's already been stolen. I don't like seeing good work wasted. Her gaze softened, just slightly. You talk like someone who still believes in people. He looked back at her. Only the ones who earn it. Their eyes held a beat longer than necessary, long enough for trust, thin and fragile to take root. Evelyn returned minutes later, pausing when she saw Malik. I didn't know we had company. He's fixing my surge, Clara said evenly, and finding things we weren't meant to see. Evelyn's expression darkened as she scanned the recovered files. That bastard. He's been bleeding us dry. Clara straightened. Not us. The fund. The people who believed in it. What now? Evelyn asked. Clara took a breath. Now we find out how deep it goes. Quietly. Malik closed his laptop, standing. I'll send you the files and wipe the rest from the system. You'll need to move fast. If he's covering his tracks, he'll notice. She nodded. You've already done enough. He met her eyes. If you want this to stay off the radar, you'll need someone invisible. Her lips curved faintly. You volunteering? He picked up his toolbox. Let's just say I'm good at fixing things. People pretend aren't broken. After he left, Clara sat in silence, the room colder than before. The city below stretched wide and indifferent, its skyline gleaming with the illusion of order. She stared at her reflection in the window. Perfect posture, immaculate suit, the face of control. But behind her own eyes, something restless had awakened. Power had always been her language, her armor. Yet now, staring at the ghost of Marcus's forged signature, she realized power meant nothing without conscience. That night, she opened a private message thread, typing 3 words to Evelyn. Start a shadow audit. Then, after a long pause, she added one more line, and trust no one but him. Far across town, Malik sat at his kitchen table, the glow of his laptop painting the walls in soft blue. Zoe was asleep in her room, her drawings scattered like small constellations across the floor. He copied the encrypted data onto a hidden drive, labeling it only with a single word, light. He didn't know why he cared so much. Maybe because for the first time in years, someone like Clara had looked at him and seen not just a worker, but a witness. Outside the snow fell again. Silent, steady, erasing footprints but never memory. The next 48 hours blurred into motion. Late-night calls, encrypted messages, numbers that didn't add up no matter how. Many times, Clara checked them. Marcus Hale had gone silent, which was never a good sign. Silence meant calculation. By Thursday morning, Evelyn entered Clara's office with the tight face of someone holding bad news. He knows, Clara looked up from her screen. Knows what exactly? That someone's been digging. He cornered the compliance team this morning. Demanded to see audit logs. He's asking questions about file access. Clara's pulse ticked once, hard. And the drive? Gone. Someone wiped the physical backups last night. Every one of them. Clara stood, the chair rolling back against the glass wall. The skyline outside glittered coldly, Ottawa wrapped in its early winter armor. He's closing the holes, Evelyn nodded, and if he connects the dots, he'll come for whoever helped you. Clara's breath caught. Malik. That night she stayed later than usual, lights in her office still glowing after most of the building went dark. The cleaning staff passed her with soft nods, used to her working until the hour turned cruel. She was reviewing correspondence from Marcus's department when her phone buzzed. Unknown number? She frowned, thumb hovering, before she swiped to read. Stop now or the engineer's daughter gets hurt. No signature, no punctuation. Just the blunt weight of threat. The air left her lungs. She stared at the screen, the room shrinking around her. For a moment her instincts, the corporate, conditioned ones, told her to delete it, to report it to legal, to pretend it was nothing. But another part of her, the one she'd buried beneath ambition and armor, whispered the truth. This wasn't about her anymore. She grabbed her coat. Across town, Malik sat at the kitchen table in his small apartment, the overhead light a soft amber glow. Zoe crouched beside a cardboard box filled with wires and foil panels. "Hold it still," she said, tongue peeking out as she adjusted a strip of aluminum. "It has to catch the light at an angle." Malik smiled. "You sound like a real engineer already." "I am a real engineer," she said proudly. "You said so." He leaned back, watching her. The model was crude. 3 tiny panels on popsicle sticks, a toy car battery taped to the base, but it worked. When the lamp hit the foil, the small fan on top spun slowly. Zoe squealed. "It moves!" Malik laughed. A full, unguarded sound. "Told you. Science doesn't need fancy labs." She grinned up at him. "Just dads who don't give up." He froze for half a heartbeat. That line, simple, pure, struck deeper than she could know. He reached over, smoothing her curls. That's the goal. Outside the window, snowflakes fell thick over Regent Park, soft enough to make the street seem peaceful. Malik didn't see the car parked across the road, engine off, lights dimmed. He didn't see the faint red blink of a small camera mounted near the curb, angled perfectly toward their apartment window. Clara's sedan pulled to the curb 20 minutes later. She didn't even remember the drive, just the cold, the way her hands shook around the steering wheel. The building looked the same as always, modest brick against the white. She climbed the stairs 2 at a time and knocked hard. Malik opened the door, surprised. "Clara, it's nearly 10. She stepped in without asking, breath sharp in the warm air. "You need to keep your daughter inside. Don't go out. Not tonight." He frowned. "What happened?" She showed him her phone. The message still glowed, black on white. Malik read it once, his jaw tightening but his face calm. "Did you tell anyone?" "Not yet. If I alert security, Marcus will know I'm on to him." He nodded slowly, thinking, then softly, "They're trying to scare you off." Her voice cracked, low but fierce. "They threatened a child, Malik." He met her eyes steady. "Which means they're afraid." "That's not comforting." "It's truth," he said. "If the truth is dangerous, it means it's worth telling." She stared at him, something between anger and awe burning under her ribs. "You're too calm." He half smiled. "You learn calm when panic doesn't feed your kid." Zoe came bounding in from the other room, carrying the solar model. "Miss Clara, it works!" Clara blinked at the sudden brightness of the child. The small world that felt safe, despite everything outside. She crouched down. "Show me," Zoe pointed proudly. "See? The light makes the fan move, like the big wind farms you build." Clara watched the blades turn under the desk lamp. Quiet and steady, she felt the smallest, strangest ache in her chest. Something like longing for a life simpler and more honest than the one she'd built. "That's beautiful," she whispered. Zoe beamed. "Dad says the world breaks if people stop building good things." Malik smiled softly. "Smart kid." The room fell still again when Zoe ran back to her room. The only sounds were the hum of the heater and the faint spin of the toy fan. Clara looked toward the window. The snow outside glowed under the street lamp, and just barely she saw it. A flicker of light, mechanical, reflecting back. Her breath hitched. "Someone's watching." Malik turned, eyes narrowing. He crossed the room, pulled the curtain aside for a fraction of a second, then dropped it. Black sedan, tinted windows, 2 people inside. "Haven't moved." Clara's voice was a whisper. "How long do you think?" "Long enough," he said quietly. "They know I helped you." The reality hung between them, heavy and cold. Clara's throat tightened. "I can fix this. I can back off, delete everything, pretend it never happened." Malik shook his head. "You won't. I have to keep you safe. And what happens to everyone else they'll threaten next?" He stepped closer, his voice firm but low. "If you stop now, they win. And they don't stop with winning." Clara met his gaze, breath shallow. For the first time in years, she felt small, but not weak, just painfully, completely human. Then we do this together, she said. He nodded. But first you leave before Zoe wakes up again. She doesn't need to see fear in this house. Clara hesitated, looking toward the child's room, where a faint nightlight painted stars on the wall. She reminds me why this matters. Exactly, Malik said. She lingered another moment, then stepped out into the hallway. The air outside bit at her skin, sharp and clean. Behind her, the curtain shifted as Malik watched until her car disappeared down the street. When he turned back, he unplugged the lamp, covered the small model, and locked the door twice. Then he sat beside his daughter's door, listening to her slow, steady breathing. Across town, in an office lit only by the glow of a single monitor, Marcus Hale read through a new log entry on his secure dashboard. Unauthorized access attempt traced to CEO credentials. He smiled thinly, tapping a pen against the desk. So Albert, he murmured to no one, you've decided to play hero. The pen stopped tapping. His voice dropped to a whisper. Let's see how long you last. Outside, the storm deepened, snow swirling like static, swallowing the streets of Ottawa. Inside, in two very different rooms, two people made the same quiet decision, not to run. Snow fell sideways that night, thick and merciless, turning Toronto into a city of ghosts. The storm came early and mean, sweeping across the skyline until even the towers of the financial district blurred into nothing. By the time Clara Reed reached Malik Grant's apartment, her tires were skidding on sheets of ice. She parked crookedly, engine still running, chest tight with adrenaline. The day had spiraled faster than she could contain. News outlets were running headlines calling her the embattled CEO of Reed Energy, accused of mishandling funds in a growing corporate scandal. Marcus had moved first, leaking doctored documents and turning her own company against her. When Malik opened the door, she looked like someone who had been running for miles through snow and silence. Clara, he said, startled, you shouldn't be out in this. She stepped inside without speaking. Snow clung to her hair, melting down her coat. I had nowhere else to go, she said, voice shaking slightly. He took her coat, hung it near the radiator. You're safe here. Sit down. She looked around. The same humble apartment she'd visited before. Warm, lived in, smelling faintly of laundry and cinnamon. The small kitchen light glowed like a candle against the storm outside. Zoe's asleep? She asked quietly. He nodded. She had hot chocolate and passed out mid-cartoon. You scared her last time, showing up like a snow angel with a warning. Clara smiled faintly, exhausted. I seem to do that a lot. Malik poured tea and handed her a mug. They came after you now. She nodded, her throat tight. The story broke this afternoon. Half the city thinks I'm a criminal. Marcus must have been preparing the leak for weeks. He studied her face, eyes hollow from sleepless nights, hands trembling slightly as she lifted the cup. And yet you still came to my door. She looked up. You were the only person I trusted to tell me the truth, even if it hurt. For a long moment neither spoke. The wind howled through the eaves like a warning, and the walls shuddered under its weight. Malik, she said softly, why are you not afraid of me? He sat across from her, arms folded loosely. Because I don't need anything from you. Not your approval, not your name. That's freedom most people don't have around you. Her lips curved faintly. You think I scare people because I'm powerful? No, he said, meeting her gaze. Because you remind them of what they gave up to stay comfortable. That landed. She looked away, fingers tightening around the mug. My mother used to say something like that. She ran this company before I did. People adored her, until she refused to look the other way. Then they destroyed her reputation. I thought if I was stronger, colder, I could survive where she didn't. Malik nodded slowly. And now? Now I see what it cost. Her voice trembled just enough to betray her. She died fighting to keep the company honest. I became the kind of person she would have pitied. He leaned forward. You're not her, Clara, but you're giving her story an ending she never got. Her eyes glistened. You make it sound noble. It is, he said quietly.
Doing the right thing when you're already bleeding, that's the only kind of courage that counts. The storm outside deepened, drumming against the window like restless fingers. A small shuffle came from the hallway. Zoe appeared, wrapped in a blanket, curls haloed by the dim light. "Miss Clara?" she murmured sleepily. "Why are you here?" Clara smiled, wiping her cheek quickly. "Just hiding from the storm." Zoe climbed onto the couch beside her without hesitation. "Then you can stay. Dad says storms pass faster when you're not alone." Malik looked at his daughter, half amused, half proud. "You're supposed to be asleep." "I was," she said, yawning, "but I wanted to make sure Miss Sunshine was okay." Clara blinked. "Miss Sunshine?" Zoe nodded seriously. "That's you, because you bring light, even when you look sad." For a second, Clara couldn't speak. Then she laughed, a quiet, unguarded sound that melted something frozen inside her. "That's the nicest thing anyone's ever called me." Zoe grinned, satisfied, and snuggled against her shoulder. "You smell like snow," she mumbled, before drifting back to sleep. Malik
covered her with the blanket, then sat back down, voice softer now. "She names everyone. You got a good one." Clara stroked Zoe's hair absent-mindedly. "Your daughter's extraordinary." "She's strong," he said. "Has to be. Her mom passed when Zoe was 4. Cancer. By the time we caught it, it was too late." Clara looked up slowly. "I'm sorry." He shrugged, eyes distant. "You learn to carry it. I used to think being a father meant fixing everything. Turns out, it just means showing up anyway." Something in his tone, tired but steady, struck a chord in her. She thought of her own father, the man who raised her with ambition instead of affection. "I wish mine had shown up," she whispered. The storm raged louder, wind rattling the window like the city itself was grieving with them. Malik stood, poured her another cup of tea. "The world takes too much from people who still care. That's why you can't let it take your warmth, too." Clara looked at him for a long time, then nodded. "You sound like someone who's seen too much." "I've seen enough," he said simply. By morning, the storm had eased into silence. The city was muffled in white, every sound softened by snow. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and something sweet. For a brief second, she didn't recognize the ceiling, the warmth, the peace. In the kitchen, Malik was flipping pancakes while Zoe set the table, humming. "Morning, Miss Sunshine," Zoe chirped when she saw her. Clara laughed, rubbing her eyes. "Morning, little engineer." "You hungry?" Malik asked. She hesitated, then smiled. Famished. She took over the stove, insisting she could cook. Malik raised an eyebrow but stepped aside. She cracked an egg with surprising precision, stirring batter with slow focus. "You cook like you negotiate," he teased. "How's that?" "Controlled chaos." She laughed again, this time louder, easier. "You don't scare easily, do you?" "Not anymore, Hafdast," he said, watching her. When the pancakes were done, they ate together, 3 people framed by sunlight spilling across the table. It felt simple, domestic, almost absurdly normal. Clara couldn't remember the last time she'd sat at a table without checking her phone. "Maybe I'll quit," she said suddenly. "Disappear, move to the countryside, open a cafe." Malik smirked. "You'd last 2 weeks." "Why?" "You like fixing things too much." She tilted her head, smiling faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe I just finally found something worth fixing." For a long moment, the 3 of them sat in quiet harmony, the storm behind them, warmth spreading through the small apartment. When Clara finally stood to leave, Malik walked her down the icy steps. The air was bright and brittle, the city glittering as if scrubbed clean. She climbed into her car, waving goodbye as he and Zoe watched from the doorway. But when she turned the key, something felt wrong. The pedal went soft beneath her foot. The car rolled forward an inch, then 2, no resistance. Her pulse spiked. She pulled the handbrake instantly, breath clouding the air. She got out, crouched by the front tire. The brake line hung loose, sliced clean. Across the street, a van idled, engine purring before it drove off into the snow. Malik saw her expression from the doorway and ran down, boots slipping on ice. Clara, what happened? She pointed wordlessly. He knelt, eyes darkening. That's deliberate. Clara straightened slowly, heart pounding but voice steady. Then it means we're close. He looked at her, proud and terrified at once. You sure you want to keep pushing this? She nodded. If they're willing to cut my brakes, they've already told me everything I need to know. For a moment the wind stilled, snowflakes hanging in the morning light like suspended time. Clara looked at Malik, at the doorway where Zoe waited, small and brave. We end this, she said quietly, and the way she said it, calm, unwavering, felt like the beginning of a reckoning. The near accident replayed in Clara's mind, long after she left Malik's building. The sound of the car rolling forward, the dead weight of brakes that didn't answer, still echoed in her ears like a second heartbeat. By the time she reached Ottawa, dawn had broken cold and colorless, washing the streets in the thin blue of early winter. Inside her penthouse, she stood motionless for minutes, staring at her own reflection in the window. The woman looking back was calm, immaculate, but she could feel the tremor beneath her skin. Whoever had cut her brakes hadn't been sending a warning anymore. They'd been making a promise. The phone rang, slicing through the silence. Evelyn. Clara answered. Tell me it's good news. A long pause. Marcus has called an emergency board meeting for Monday. The official line is leadership restructuring. Off the record, he's going to move to have you removed. Clara's hand tightened around the phone. On what grounds? Financial negligence. He'll use the fabricated documents he leaked to the press. Some of the board members are already leaning his way. They're scared, Clara. He's dangling stability in front of them. Clara closed her eyes. And the audit? Still off the books. No one outside our circle knows it exists. But if you go down before we can publish, everything goes with you. The line crackled. Evelyn's voice softened. You need a plan. Fast. I have one, Clara said quietly. I just don't know if it's survivable. That evening, she drove back to Toronto. The storm had passed, leaving the world brittle and too bright. Malik was in the courtyard with Zoe, their breath curling in the cold as they tested her latest school project. Look, Miss Sunshine, Zoe shouted when she saw her. It works. Malik smiled. She's been at it all day. Wants to beat the science fair deadline. On the table sat a small mason jar. Inside it, a light bulb wired to a tiny solar panel. The bulb flickered weakly, then steadied, glowing with a fragile golden light. Clara crouched beside it. That's beautiful, Zoe grinned. It's called Lightkeeper. Even when it's dark, it remembers how to shine. The words hit Clara harder than they should have. She looked at Malik, and in his eyes, she saw the same quiet understanding. After Zoe went inside, Clara told him everything. The board meeting, Marcus's coup, the danger circling closer. He's not just trying to destroy my reputation anymore, she said. He's erasing the proof. Malik listened, arms folded, the same calm steadiness that had grounded her from the beginning. So what happens if you fight him and lose? Then I burn everything down, she said simply. He studied her face. You mean leak it? She nodded. 3 journalists I trust, 1 independent MP, 1 environmental coalition. If I can't save the company, I can save the truth. Malik exhaled. That'll make enemies out of everyone. They already are, she said. He was quiet for a long time, then asked, You're sure this is worth it? She met his eyes. If I walk away now, I teach every woman after me that fear is policy, and I'm done teaching that. Malik nodded slowly. Then let's do it right. They spent the next hours at the kitchen table, piecing together the digital trail. Emails, financial transfers, hidden memos. Malik handled the encryption, his fingers flying across the keyboard while Clara organized timelines and names. The hum of their laptops mingled with the low crackle of the radiator, the domestic rhythm absurdly calm against the magnitude of what they were doing. Zoe wandered in halfway through, wearing her pajamas and holding her little solar lamp. Can I stay up? Not tonight, Malik said. But it's important, she insisted, setting the jar between them. It helps when it's dark. The soft light spilled across their faces, flickering but steady. Malik smiled faintly. She's not wrong. Clara looked at the small glow in the jar, something catching in her throat. Truth never dies, she murmured. Malik turned to her. What? Nothing, she said, blinking. Just something my mother used to say. He gave her a quiet look, half question, half admiration. She raised a fighter. She raised a believer, Clara corrected. I forgot that part for a while. By midnight, everything was ready. Clara uploaded the encrypted files to 5 secure folders, each labeled with a simple code name, Echo 1 through Echo 5. Malik watched as she attached the links to 5 separate draft emails. 3 journalists, she said aloud, typing. 1 member of parliament, Gillian Tran, independent, clean record, and 1 environmental watchdog. She hesitated, fingers hovering above the keyboard. Malik placed a hand over hers. Once you send it, there's no taking it back. I know. Then breathe first. She did. Inhale, exhale. Then she pressed send. The progress bar slid across the screen like a blade cutting through fog. For a moment, nothing happened. The apartment was silent, except for the hum of Zoe's small lamp. Clara stared at the computer, feeling both empty and alive, like she'd stepped off a cliff and finally found the courage to fall. Malik leaned back, his voice soft. You just lit the fuse. She looked at him, exhaustion shadowing her features, but resolve burning underneath. Let it burn clean. Morning came with chaos. Every major news outlet carried the story before sunrise. Whistleblower inside Reed Energy exposes offshore transfers. Board implicated in green fund scandal. CEO may have been framed. The internet exploded. Hashtags, debates, live panels. Former employees came forward. Investors demanded statements, and by 9 a.m., the company's stock had plunged 12%. Clara's phone buzzed nonstop. Evelyn's voice came through one of the calls, taut but trembling. It's everywhere. You did it. No, Clara said, watching the sunlight pour over the snow outside Malik's window. We did it. Through the glass, she could see Zoe holding up her little solar jar to the morning light, charging it again for the night. Malik stood beside her, smiling quietly. Clara closed her eyes, a deep breath filling her chest. The truth was out now. Whatever came next, lawsuits, fallout, the end of her career, it didn't matter. The world finally saw what had been hiding in the dark, and somewhere in the heart of the storm, a little girl's light kept shining. Proof that no matter how deep the night got, it could never last forever. The backlash came like a second storm, louder, crueler, and far more personal. 3 days after the leak, Marcus Hale filed a defamation lawsuit against Clara Reed, accusing her of willfully sabotaging corporate reputation and colluding with unauthorized personnel. His lawyers held a press conference, crisp suits and polished indignation, painting him as the victim of a reckless CEO driven by emotional instability and an inappropriate relationship with a technician. The words hit the airwaves like shrapnel. Within hours, Clara's name trended again, this time paired with Sleeping with the Help. CBC, Global, even morning radio hosts latched on. The fall of Canada's youngest energy CEO. From boardroom brilliance to romantic scandal. Her inbox filled with hate, pity, and thinly veiled delight. In Regent Park, Malik sat at a small kitchen table, staring at the television. The anchor's voice was smooth and cold. Sources close to the company alleged that Ms. Reed's relationship with maintenance engineer Malik Grant compromised internal investigations. Zoe's school bag dropped to the floor. Dad, she whispered. They said your name. He turned off the TV. The silence felt heavier than the noise had. Yeah, he said softly. They did. But the next morning, reporters camped outside both their buildings, cameras flashing. Questions shouted through the wind. Ms. Reed, did you falsify data? Mr. Grant, are you in a relationship with your boss? Clara ignored them, but every headline drew blood. Her company email access was suspended, pending investigation. Evelyn's warning came short and panicked. Marcus got to the board first. They're distancing themselves. Temporary leave, effective immediately. Across town, Mullick received a call from his supervisor. The voice was awkward, apologetic. Mullick, I'm sorry. Corporate's putting you on administrative suspension until the inquiry's over. They said it's optics. He laughed once, hollow. Optics, right. He hung up and looked around the apartment, the same walls that had held warmth and laughter a few nights ago. Zoe sat on the couch, knees tucked under her chin. Dad, she said quietly, kids at school said you're in trouble because you helped Miss Sunshine. He knelt in front of her. Sometimes, when you tell the truth, people get scared. And scared, people do mean things. Are you scared? He smiled sadly. A little, but not enough to stop. That evening, Clara showed up at his door again. No cameras this time, just exhaustion. Her hair was pulled back, her eyes red. I told you this would happen, she said, before he could speak. They're destroying everything you've built. You should have never what? Never helped me. He shook his head. Don't do that. I dragged you into a war that isn't yours. It's ours now, he said evenly. She paced the room, trembling. You don't understand, Malik. They'll ruin your name, your daughter's life. You can still walk away. He took a long breath, steady. If I walk away now, I teach my daughter to fear honesty. Clara froze. The words cut through her panic like steel. Malik stepped closer, voice softer but firm. You think this is just about saving your company. It's not. It's about showing her, and every kid watching, that truth doesn't belong only to the powerful. She blinked hard, swallowing a lump in her throat. You shouldn't have to pay this price. He met her eyes. Neither should you. The following days were brutal. Anonymous letters under Clara's apartment door, harassing emails. A gossip blog leaked a blurred photo of her and Malik outside his building, twisting it into proof of affair and corruption. Zoe stopped eating lunch at school after a group of older kids mimicked the headlines, whispering that her dad fixed more than light bulbs. Malik found out when she came home with a tear-streaked face and ripped drawing paper in her bag. He held her close, his anger quiet and contained. You didn't do anything wrong, Zoe. None of this is your fault. She sniffled. I know, but it's not fair. No, he said. It isn't. Meanwhile, Clara sat in her darkened apartment, watching the city lights blur through frost. Evelyn called nightly, her voice equal parts fear and admiration. He's burning through your credibility, Clara. But the documents are holding up. The investigators have confirmed the offshore accounts are real. Then why does it feel like I'm losing? Clara whispered. Because truth takes longer to trend than gossip, Evelyn said. But it lasts longer too. 2 days later, a producer from CBC News reached out privately. We want to give you a chance to speak. Live. Prime time. Tell your side before the lawsuit drowns it out. Clara hesitated, staring at the email for a long moment. Then she forwarded it to Malik with a single line. If we do this, we do it together. He called almost immediately. You sure about this? No, she admitted, but hiding hasn't worked. There was a pause, then his quiet reply. Then we stop hiding. The night of the broadcast, snow was falling again, thin, drifting like ash. The studio lights were blindingly white against the dark glass of the set. Clara sat at one end of the table, Malik at the other. Between them, a host with the calm neutrality of someone trained not to flinch. Ms. Reed, Mr. Grant, she began. The country's been watching your story unfold. Accusations of corruption, retaliation, and now a defamation lawsuit. Why speak out now? Clara drew a steady breath. Because silence is a luxury of the innocent, and I no longer have that. She turned to Malik. Because people like him are paying the price for what powerful men like Marcus Hale do behind closed doors. Malik's voice came low, deliberate.
I didn't help Clara because she's rich or famous. I helped her because truth doesn't fix itself. Someone has to do the work. The interviewer leaned forward. And the rumors of your relationship? Clara answered before he could. Marcus Hale weaponized decency. He couldn't discredit the facts, so he tried to discredit the people telling them. Malik added quietly, "The truth's not less true because it makes people uncomfortable." The host nodded, momentarily, at a loss for words. As the segment ended, the producer's voice crackled through the earpiece. "We're live. 40,000 comments in 5 minutes." The red light on the camera blinked off. Clara exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. Malik turned to her, offering a faint smile. "You did good, Har," he said. "So did you." Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and relentless, covering the city like a promise. For the first time since it all began, the truth had a face, two, in fact, and neither of them was backing down. When the cameras finally dimmed, the silence in the CBC studio felt unreal, like the world had been holding its breath. Outside, the night air of Toronto was cold and electric. The broadcast was over, but its echo had only begun. By midnight, the clip of Clara and Malik's interview had been viewed over 2 million times. The hashtags Clean Energy Truth and Haichis We Stand With Clara surged across every platform. Newspapers that had mocked her last week now called her the woman who risked everything to tell the truth. Across the country, something shifted. Factory workers, students, parents, people who had never cared about corporate trials, shared her words. Silence is not neutral, it's permission. That sentence became a rallying cry. Malik woke early the next morning to the sound of his phone buzzing endlessly. Reporters wanted quotes. Schools wanted him to speak to kids about ethical courage. He ignored them all, choosing instead to pour Zoe's cereal and turn on the radio. The host's voice trembled slightly as he said, in a rare live interview, former CEO Clara Reid and engineer Malik Grant ignited what some are calling a new wave of corporate transparency. Their broadcast has drawn international attention. Zoe looked up. "We're on the radio?" Malik smiled faintly. "Sort of." Then she grinned. "Miss Sunshine is famous now." For the first time in months, Clara felt the air move differently when she stepped outside her apartment. Strange River smiled instead of whispering. A delivery driver told her, "My wife watched your interview, said you gave her hope, but victory was never meant to last long." That afternoon, Evelyn burst into Clara's office, coat still dripping from the sleet outside. "He's hitting back," she said, breathless. Clara frowned. "Marcus?" Evelyn nodded and set her tablet on the desk. On the screen, a breaking news banner scrolled beneath the headline, "Exposed. Video shows Clara Reid accepting bribes from private energy contractor." The footage was grainy but clear enough to wound. A woman with Clara's profile sitting in a restaurant, an envelope sliding across the table. A narrator's voice claimed it was a payoff for her cooperation in the cover-up. Clara's face drained of color. "That's fake. God, that's edited." "I know," Evelyn said, "but it's spreading faster than the truth ever did." By 5 p.m., pundits were dissecting every frame. Commentators called it the scandal that changes everything. Old enemies resurfaced online, eager to reclaim the moral high ground. Outside, the same reporters who had cheered her 24 hours earlier were now shouting questions through the rain. "Did you take money, Ms. Reid? Was your confession a performance?" Her phone rang. Malik. "Clara, I just saw it," he said, voice low. "Zoe's asking why people think you're bad again." Clara pressed her fingers to her temples. "Because truth scares people, Malik. Especially when it survives." There was a pause. "Then we outlast them." That night, Evelyn stayed in Clara's apartment, hunched over 2 laptops, combing metadata frame by frame. Hours passed. 1 cup of coffee, then 2, then 5. At 3:14 a.m., she sat up suddenly. "Wait, look." She zoomed in on the timestamp in the corner of the fake video. It flickered inconsistently, impossible under any real surveillance feed.
The frame rate's wrong, she said. And the person in the reflection, Marcus's driver, he was there. She clicked again, pulling up the restaurant's original CCTV log she'd accessed through a private contact. Different date, different year. The envelope was empty. It was part of a charity handoff. He spliced the footage. Clara's breath caught. Can we prove it? Evelyn grinned grimly. Already uploading the uncut version to every major outlet, and I sent the files to the Federal Ethics Commission. By dawn, the narrative had flipped again. CBC ran a follow-up. Evidence confirms bribe, video a deepfake. Source, tied to Marcus Hale. The hashtag changed too. From Malchar's Clean Energy Truth to Stop the Setup. Thousands of Canadians flooded social media with messages of support. They tried to bury her, but they forgot she's the one who planted the seed. Environmental groups announced a protest outside Reed Energy headquarters, not against Clara, but for her. Even Malak's small neighborhood in Regent Park lit candles in their windows that night, the soft flicker of solidarity. Zoe held up her solar lamp at the window and whispered, "From Miss Sunshine." When a downtown penthouse miles away, Marcus Hale was unraveling. His phone rang without pause. Lawyers, investors, board members. Some begged him to stay quiet. Others threatened to turn on him. He poured a drink with shaking hands, staring at his reflection in the dark window. Then came the knock. Sharp, authoritative. He opened the door to two agents from the Federal Bureau of Economic Crimes. Marcus Hale? His smile faltered. "This is a mistake." "It usually is," one of them said. 15 minutes later, Marcus Hale was escorted through the lobby in handcuffs as cameras flashed like lightning. When Evelyn called Clara that morning, her voice trembled, but carried something almost sacred. "They've taken him, Clara. The Bureau has opened a full investigation. Fraud, document tampering, obstruction of justice." Clara stood at her window, watching the sunrise spill gold over the city. She didn't smile. Not yet. "It's not over," she said quietly, "but for the first time, it's honest." Evelyn exhaled on the other end. "That's more than most people get." Clara nodded slowly, eyes tracing the horizon. The snow on the rooftops glowed pale against the morning light. Down in Regent Park, Malak and Zoe stepped out onto their balcony. Zoe held up her solar lamp, charging it under the sun. "It's working again," she said. Malak smiled. "Yeah, so is the truth." And somewhere between the rising sun and the city still thawing from winter, the storm, that began with silence, finally broke into light. The courthouse rose like a fortress above downtown Ottawa, its stone facade slick with rain. Crowds had already gathered before sunrise. Protesters, reporters, former employees, and ordinary citizens, clutching hand-painted signs that read, "Truth has power, and light over lies." Inside, the atmosphere crackled with tension. The trial of Marcus Hale had begun, and for the first time in months, Clara Reed would face both the public and the ghosts of her own silence. She sat at the plaintiff's table back straight, her composure carved from months of endurance. Evelyn was beside her, fingers interlaced in quiet solidarity. Across the aisle, Marcus leaned back, expressionless, a man who once thought himself untouchable, now surrounded by lawyers whispering strategy in low tones. The judge's gavel struck once, echoing through the chamber. Court is now in session. The prosecution opened with facts, numbers, documents, timelines. The fraud was no longer rumor, but record. Offshore accounts, altered audits, memos with forged signatures. Each detail was a blade, clean and precise. But the heart of the case wasn't paperwork, it was morality, and Clara knew it. When her name was called to testify, the room seemed to contract around her. Cameras clicked softly, pens froze above notebooks. She rose, swore the oath, and took her seat at the witness stand. The lawyer asked the first question. "Ms. Reed, as CEO, what did you know about these transactions?" Clara inhaled. The microphone caught the faint tremor of her breath. "Less than I should have," she said quietly. "That's not an excuse. It's the truth. I trusted reports I should have questioned. I prioritized reputation over responsibility, and I let silence do the talking for me. The lawyer stepped closer. You're admitting fault? I'm admitting humanity, she replied. But there's a difference between making a mistake and building a lie. I didn't steal from anyone, but I didn't stop those who did. And silence, in moments like that, is a kind of complicity. The phrase hung in the air. Silence is a kind of complicity. It would be printed on headlines the next morning. Clara's voice steadied. I can't undo what was lost, but I can stand here and say that integrity isn't about being perfect. It's about refusing to stay quiet when you finally know better. A murmur ran through the courtroom. The judge rapped his gavel once, but didn't hide the flicker of respect in his eyes. When cross-examined, Marcus's attorney tried to twist the narrative. Mrs. and Reed, isn't it true that your so-called whistleblowing saved you from prosecution? No, she said simply. It saved the truth. Whether it ruins me or not doesn't matter anymore. And yet, the lawyer pressed, you stand to gain public sympathy, perhaps a book deal, political aspirations. Clara met his gaze, calm and sharp. You think integrity is a business strategy? That's why we're here. Even Marcus looked away. Hours passed. Witness after witness testified. Financial analysts, internal auditors, and finally Evelyn, who recounted how the falsified reports were uncovered. The court listened, rapt, as she described the fear of confronting power and the courage that came too late for many who'd lost their jobs. When Evelyn stepped down, the judge called for a recess. The crowd filed out to stretch, whispering about the woman who had just admitted the cost of silence to millions watching live. In the hallway, Clara stood by a window, staring out at the gray rain washing the steps. Her reflection looked older, but freer. Then she saw them, Malik and Zoe, waiting near the gallery entrance. Zoe waved the moment she spotted her. Miss Sunshine, Clara blinked, startled. What are you doing here? Malik smiled faintly. Zoe wanted to see what truth looks like in real life. Clara crouched to the girl's level. It's not always this exciting, she said softly. Zoe shook her head. It's still important. Before Clara could reply, the bailiff's voice called everyone back. As she walked toward the courtroom, Zoe tugged Malik's sleeve. Dad? Yeah? You can be brave and kind at the same time, right? Malik's eyes softened. Yeah, kiddo, that's the best way to be. Clara heard the words as the doors closed behind her. Somehow, they steadied her more than any legal advice could have. The defense called Marcus to the stand. His voice was slick but unconvincing. He blamed subordinates, consultants, even a culture of misinterpretation. He talked about loyalty, misunderstanding, and bad optics. When the prosecutor asked him directly, "Did you falsify reports and divert funds for personal gain?" Marcus hesitated. Too long. "I acted in the company's best interest," he finally said. "That's not an answer," the prosecutor replied coldly. The courtroom was silent, except for the rain tapping against the windows. In closing arguments, the prosecution's lawyer didn't shout. He simply said, "This trial isn't about profit or politics. It's about integrity, the kind that survives pressure, power, and fear. Ms. Reed chose truth over safety. Mr. Hale chose lies over loyalty. Today, you decide which one defines us." The defense tried to spin doubt, but the room already knew the verdict before the jury even left. Deliberation took 5 hours. Clara sat still, hands folded, Malik and Zoe somewhere in the back, waiting. Rain turned to sunlight as the afternoon deepened. When the jury filed in, no one breathed. The foreperson stood. On the charge of corporate fraud, we find the defendant, Marcus Hale, guilty. A ripple of sound, gasps, muffled sobs, applause that the judge's gavel couldn't entirely silence. Marcus's face drained of color. His lawyer stared at the table. And on the matter of negligence and complicity, Ms. Reed is found not culpable. Her cooperation and testimony were vital to the prosecution's case. Clara exhaled, not with triumph, but relief so profound it almost hurt. Across the room, Malik rose slowly. Zoe perched on his knee. Their eyes met across the sea of faces. No words, just gratitude and understanding. Zoe whispered, "She did it." Malik smiled. They all did. At that exact moment, sunlight broke through the courthouse windows. It poured across the room like liquid gold, spilling over the benches, the judge's stand, the jury box. Dust motes danced in the glow, warm and alive. It touched Clara's face, last, soft, steady, forgiving. Reporters captured the image, the woman who faced the storm, standing in the light again. Later that photo would circle the globe, captioned, "Integrity Restored." But in that instant, Clara wasn't thinking of history or headlines. She was thinking of her mother, of Malik and Zoe, of every voice that had been silenced until someone decided not to be afraid. As the gavel fell one final time, Clara whispered under her breath, "We did it." Outside, the sky cleared, the city glimmered under the new light, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like the world was ready to start again. Toronto thawed slowly that spring, as if the city itself was learning how to breathe again. The last shards of ice clung stubbornly to sidewalks, melting into clear streams that ran down to the gutters. The air smelled of wet pavement, new grass, and something rarer, renewal. The storm had passed, not just the one that had blanketed the city for months, but the one that had nearly buried truth beneath it. At the edge of the harbor, construction crews were back at work on the Reed Energy Clean Initiative, a project once frozen by scandal, now resurrected under new management. The turbines gleamed in the weak sunlight, silent witnesses to the strange resilience of people who refused to give up. From a distance, Clara Reed watched in her simple wool coat. She was no longer CEO Reed. She had stepped down after the trial's verdict, her resignation letter brief but dignified. To rebuild something honestly, one must first let go of the crown that broke it. The board had protested, of course. Investors wanted her to stay. The media wanted a redemption arc. But Clara had already made peace with her choice. She didn't need a throne, she needed purpose, and she found it. 2 months after leaving Reed Energy, she founded the Reed Grant Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping underprivileged children pursue STEM education and environmental research. The name surprised Malik when she first told him. "You didn't have to include me," he said, uneasy. Clara smiled. "You didn't have to believe in me either, but you did." The foundation began modestly. A few scholarships, a small mentorship program, but within weeks, donations poured in from across the country. Parents wrote letters saying their children wanted to build things that fix the world. The first initiative was close to home, the renovation of the community library at Regent Park, where Zoe and her classmates spent most afternoons. The day of the ribbon-cutting ceremony dawned bright and cold. The last snow patches glistened like forgotten glass on the grass. Clara arrived early, her hands in her pockets, watching volunteers arrange chairs and banners. Malik was already there, wearing his old field jacket, the same one from the night she'd first stepped into his apartment. Only now it bore the logo of a new project, Community Energy Network, Toronto South, a grassroots program bringing solar power to low-income neighborhoods. "Manager Grant," she teased, handing him a coffee. He smirked. "That still sounds weird." "Better get used to it," she said. "You're building half the city's microgrid." He shrugged, modest as ever. "Just doing the work." She looked at him then, really looked. The quiet steadiness, the hands, scarred from years of labor, the eyes that had once met hers across a gulf of class and circumstance. Somehow, they had met in the middle and built something that might actually last. "You know," she said softly, "if someone told me a year ago that I'd be standing in a park watching a mechanic and a 9-year-old change the city, I'd have laughed." Malik chuckled. "That's because you didn't know how good we are at fixing things." Before she could answer, a small voice shouted, "Miss Sunshine, we're ready." Zoe came running, her hair tucked under a yellow beanie, cheeks pink from the cold. She held a giant pair of ribbon scissors almost too big for her hands. Behind her, a crowd had gathered, families, local officials, former Reed Energy employees who'd returned to work under the new ethics charter. The banner above the entrance read, "Reading Room, Zoe's Light." Clara blinked, suddenly unable to speak. Zoe grinned up at her. "Dad said you named it after me, but I think it's really for you." "No," Clara managed. "It's for everyone who kept believing." A journalist approached, camera in hand. "Zoe, can you tell us what this room means to you?" Zoe thought for a second, then said simply, "It means stories don't end when things get hard. You just keep reading until the light comes back." Applause rippled through the crowd. Even the cameraman smiled. Malik placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Go on, kiddo." Zoe lifted the scissors, sliced the ribbon clean, and the doors swung open. Inside, sunlight streamed through new glass windows, catching the shimmer of painted murals, children, books, wind turbines, and in the center, a single phrase, painted in bright blue letters, "Truth never dies. It just waits for someone brave enough to speak it." Later that afternoon, when the crowd had thinned and the speeches were done, the three of them walked toward the edge of the park. The air was cool but gentle. Meltwater dripped from the trees, each drop catching the fading light. Zoe walked between them, holding both their hands, skipping every few steps to avoid puddles. "You know," she said suddenly, "I think the snow is like people." Clara looked down, smiling. "Oh, how so?" "It hides everything for a while," Zoe said. "But when it melts, you see what's underneath, and it's not gone. It just becomes part of the river." Malik glanced at Clara. "She gets that from you." Clara shook her head. "No, from both of us." They reached the bridge overlooking the frozen lake, now streaked with veins of water. The sun hung low, a soft gold disk behind the clouds. Clara exhaled. "You ever think about how much power changes people?" Malik nodded. "Power doesn't change everyone. It just shows who they already were." Clara's gaze lingered on the horizon. "Then maybe we can teach the next generation to hold it differently." He smiled. "That's what you're already doing." For a while they just stood there, listening to the quiet hum of the city rediscovering itself. Snowmelt trickled under their feet. The faint sound of jazz drifted from a cafe across the street, soft, nostalgic, alive. Zoe squeezed their hands and whispered, "We did it, right?" Clara bent down. "Yeah, sweetheart, we did." Malik looked at the sky where sunlight broke through the clouds, scattering across the wet pavement like tiny mirrors. And as they walked home, three silhouettes against a city being reborn, the narrator's voice would have said, if there had been one, "Power can build towers or bridges. It depends on who holds the light." The screen would fade to black. A slow jazz melody would rise, warm and steady, and the story finally would rest in peace.